age is just a number. And I agree with that. It's like, I'm not dating an age, I'm dating a person. And like, what do they like to do? How do they spend their free time? Where are they in life? Are they intelligent? Do they have a similar sense of humor? Like, the age is just a byproduct. I'm not going to lie. Like, of course, a beautiful young woman, I'm happy with that. um, but if there was somebody that I found attractive that was close to my own age and has similar activity levels, I'm all in on that.
This is episode number 551 with Jeff Kimes, Dating Do's and Don'ts from a Single Divorced Dad. I get a lot of requests for having more men on the show. We tend to have a lot of women. So I'm excited to have Jeff on the show. He is not only a single divorced dad, but he's also a podcast host and he does a podcast about dating. So I thought that would be sort of a double treat to have somebody who's actually dating and talks about dating on his podcast. But before I bring him on, I just wanted to welcome you back to Last First Date Radio, where we believe it is never too late to go on your last first date. And to support you on your journey to lasting love, I wrote two books. The first one is Becoming a Woman of Value, How to Thrive in Life and Love. And this book is for women who want to really increase their success in all areas of life and love. And the second book was just released on Valentine's Day. It's called Choice Points in Dating. And it is to empower people to make healthier choices at every stage of dating so that you end up in a healthy relationship. We so often think that we don't have choices. And that's really what inspired me to write this book. You can find both of the books on Amazon for Kindle or paperback. And every week I bring you a tip from the first book. And it's this week's tip is step number 22, which is communicate clearly and graciously. Communication. I love teaching communication skills because so few of us really understand how to communicate clearly, kindly, graciously, directly. It is a skill that we are not taught at home. We are usually modeled terrible communication skills, both from family of origin and from the people that we know. It's so much easier to beat around the bush and not be direct. And we think if we're going to be direct, we're going to be mean. And so we often will then be passive aggressive, which I did for so many years of my life. So I want to encourage you this week to try and just do one conversation where you're really clear and direct. And I will guarantee you that it is going to really help you get closer to that person and feel more aligned with your authentic self. Before I bring Jeff on, one more thing, which is to join my fabulous Facebook group. It's called Your Last First Date, and we are a group for women only. Sorry, guys. But we are a safe space for women to come to really grow on their journey to lasting love. It is a positive, supportive environment. I want to invite you, if you're not yet a member, to join us at Your Last First Date. And now for my guest, Jeff Kimes. He is a single divorced dad of two college-age girls. He's in his 50s and he's dating in Denver, Colorado. He is the host of the podcast Dating Daze, where he and his guests talk about sex and love, breakups, divorce, and everything related to dating. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here. It's great. I love podcasts, like you said. It's great to talk to other podcasters, and I listen to podcasts all the time. I love them, and that's kind of partly why I started my own a couple of years ago. Was I was dating, and it was confusing and frustrating, and I would come upon humorous or interesting stories, and I was like, I think I'll make a couple podcasts, and now I have like almost 50 episodes, not nearly as many as you, but yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. It's not easy to start a podcast. So I give you a lot of
Yeah.
credit for getting started. You have like a professional microphone and headphones.
Yeah.
Oh my God. When I started, I was on Blog Talk Radio, which was a horrible platform, and everything was done over the phone. So we would call in to the podcast and it was live. And I would have these prank callers call in sometimes. And I mean, it was just like a
Huh.
kind of a mess, but sometimes amazing. Like I had one guest who had 100 people call in because she was so popular. I think it was some kind of emotional verbal abuse expert. And so many people were suffering that they were all calling in and wanting to be heard.
Huh.
So it had its ups and a lot of
Yeah.
downs. And now I'm happy to be off that platform and here with you today. So let's
Yeah.
talk about dating in Denver. What is it like to be dating right now as a post-divorce midlife single?
I enjoy it. I mean, I've been divorced more than 13 years, and I thought it was going to be really rough. Like I thought, well, I'm divorced. I was in my 40s, and I'm like, this is not going to go well. But I mean, it's been fun. It is frustrating. Like I said, I start dating and didn't really hadn't done it for 15 years, and would things would happen, and I like, you typical stuff, like you'd go out on a date and think it went pretty well, and then you wouldn't hear from the people again, or you'd go out with them and they'd say or do stuff that you found amusing, or you'd look at their profiles and see these different trends among profiles, and I'd write notes about them and tell my friends about it. And then I was like, I should, there's probably a lot of people that feel like this, and maybe it wouldn't hurt to talk about it so that other people go like, oh yeah, I understand that too. Also, I was like, well, this is just me, one man, wondering what do women think about all this. So my friend Mindy does the podcast with me a lot and gives her perspective. And I mean, I think that's dating in Denver is great. I mean, it's an outdoor city where people are fit and are active, and um, do a lot of the things that I like to do, the skiing and hiking and mountain biking. And so for that, I think it's pretty good. Um, I know a lot of women. You mentioned on your group page, a lot of people will complain about dating, or the opposite sex or whoever they're dating. And there are a lot of women here that might complain like it's hard to get guys in Denver to date them because the men are so busy, skiing or hiking or rock climbing or whatever, that if you're not going to do that, you're not going to get one. So, or they'd rather do that and drink IPAs. So, um, that I hear that a lot, but from my perspective, it's pretty good. And I guess for women, I guess what would you rather have? Like a couch potato that doesn't, just sits around and doesn't do anything, or somebody that's active and has a lot of things going on? I would prefer the latter, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I prefer the latter. And I just actually posed this question in my Facebook group because someone had pitched an article for me to add a blurb to. And it was about the age gap where younger women are attracted to older men and vice versa. And I added a piece to that because I find that as women age, they often are getting more active. They
Mm,
actually start new businesses. They're if they've been home with children, now they have freedom and they're kind of reinventing themselves, as I did when I got divorced. And a lot of the men that I was meeting and that the women I work with were meeting were kind of retiring and slowing down and not as active. And so these women are like, I want a guy who can keep up with me. So I think that it's, it's not you, there's no one size fits all. I think that we
that
have to find the people who can keep up with us, find the people who are energetically similar, right?
yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I end up dating women that are younger than me a, a lot of the time. It's not like, okay, I won't date you if you're close to my age or anything like that. It has a lot to do with what you just said about your energy levels and your activity levels. And on my Facebook group page, a lot of women will complain that, hey, guys are just going out with younger women. And I sort of look at it like the age it's an old saying, but like age is just a number. And I agree with that. It's like I'm not dating an age, I'm dating a person. And like, what do they like to do? How do they spend their free time? Where are they in life? Are they intelligent? Do they have a similar sense of humor? Like the age is just a byproduct. I'm not going to lie. Like, of course, a beautiful young woman, I'm happy with that. But if there was somebody that I found attractive that was close to my own age and has similar activity levels, I'm all in on that. And I have found that many, like what you just said about a lot of men sort of slow down and then the women are looking for younger guys because of the activities. But I don't know. I find that a lot of women that are my age are not doing a lot of stuff. And it's not, it's not very fun. So yeah, that's kind of, and then people will say like, oh, like you don't have much in common. I'm like, with younger women, and if it's more than 10 years or 15 years age difference, and I'm like, that's not true at all. Like they'll be like, well, what about your musical taste? So I'm like, I mean, some people that are older or some people that are younger have the exact same musical taste, for example. But also, I don't think you have to have the same musical taste to have a good relationship with somebody. And you know similar thing with like, where are you at in life? Are you, I mean, I'm to the age now where most of the women that I would date are past the age of wanting to have children, like give birth to them, but they already have them. But if you're younger, where you're dating somebody and you've already got kids, you're not going to have anymore. Obviously, you're going to not date somebody that's, if you don't want anymore, you're not going to get with somebody that's younger and still looking to have children. That kind of stuff is where, I mean, where are you in life? But things along those lines are, the age is just a byproduct of it, I think.
Yeah,
So
I have to agree with you. And I'm happy to hear you say that because I find so many people put people in a box so quickly and they just assume so many things about a person. It's one of the things that I do all the time in coaching is to have people really look at their biases. If a person's never been married, oh, they must be terrible at relationships. Or
right.
a person who's divorced, they can't make relationships work. Oh, a person who's widowed, oh, they probably will compare me to their wife or husband, and then I will never be able to compete. And so it's so important to look at the ways that we prejudge people and to just date the person in front of you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, totally agree with that. And when like I said, I've been divorced 13 years. When I first got divorced, my two girls were 5 and 8 years old. I would have the kids half the time and then, free to do what I wanted the other half of the time. But I ended up finding that I was ending up dating women that didn't have kids. And it's not because that's who I was looking for or whatever. It honestly was just a matter of the fact that they had more time to meet and go out and hang out. And I wasn't against dating women that had kids, young kids, whatever age. It's just that it was just, the logistics of it, really. So putting them in a box, like you said, would encourage people not to do that. Just look at the actual person. And that's one of the things about online dating. In some ways, like you might be ruling out a lot of great people that you really match with because you've said, well, I'm not going to date anybody with kids or whatever. I think that's one of the problems with online is, and we've had an episode about this on our podcast about where you have in your head, here's the what I'm looking for, and you might be ruling out a lot of people. And I find myself being like, well, here's what I'm looking for. But then I'm overly optimistic where well, I was looking for somebody like that had or didn't have these qualities or, things that they did. But then I would just be, I'll just give it a chance. So there's a sort of a balance in there between, I guess, what you'd call your deal breakers or your must haves or must not haves. So yeah, it can be a little confusing. You really got to think it through, like what truly are, like they absolutely have to have or not have these certain qualities or things that they do or don't do. to narrow it down, but kind of leaving open the possibilities, or maybe opening your mind to these experiences with people that you originally were like, no, I can't do that.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people who come in to coaching saying they absolutely must go on christianmingle.com and only date Christians, and because they're religious. And then they go on the website and it's like crazy people and just
Mm-hmm.
people who are totally not a good fit. And so we get to the bottom line, like, what's important about this to you? What will you and won't you tolerate in a partner in terms of religion? And so, like, I have a client I have a male client who's trying to get back into religion. And I had him really map out what is it that's most important, because is it somebody who has to go to church with you? Is it somebody who just respects that you want to do your thing, and will you respect their thing? It's like we really have to get clear about those things, because we can often overlook somebody who's potentially a great partner by having the wrong list of must haves.
That religion thing is my co-host Mindy, she will put that on her profiles. Like, I'll look at her profile to kind of go over it. We'll read our profiles. I'm not on any online dating currently, but Mindy will be sort of on and off it. And I'll look at her profile, and I and she'll put she goes to church, and that's a thing for her, Christianity. And I'm like, Mindy, you mentioned it like 4 times in your profile that, Christ or whatever, like, it seems a little too much to me. She goes, no, but it's really important to me. And I'm like, well, I mean, what you said is probably, that's a great way for her to think about it. Like, what are the things about that you're looking for? Because I think you're going to scare a lot of pretty good matches off that might look at that and go, oh my gosh, like, that's too much Jesus for me, to date somebody like that. And
Right.
And then, like you said, she'll get these guys like, well, they're kind of weirdos, whatever, but oh yeah, they're really into Jesus. And like, maybe there's a good balance there.
Exactly.
That Yeah.
One of the things that he concluded was it was the value system of the religion that he really was attracted to. And so a person can be of a different religion and have that, or they can have really good values and ethics and not be religious at all and have those values. And so we really have to get clear, what is it about it? And what is your bottom line? Because you do scare off a lot of people who could be a possible match, and you could be overlooking these amazing people who are a better fit for you than somebody who's a fanatical Jesus freak.
Religion aside, that kind of concept. All right, so I live in Colorado, and I'm very passionate about skiing. I coach skiing. I go up and do it a lot. But over the last 13 years, there's been a number of pretty good relationships I've had with people where they really weren't skiers or snowboarders. And I've kind of gone back and forth on that. Like, well, do they have to do it? And, or could I be in a good relationship with somebody that doesn't ski or snowboard? That's just one example of that type of thing. And I don't know. A lot of my friends are like, you're going to need somebody that's into it, or it's going to be difficult. But sometimes I'll meet somebody, they ski or snowboard, but honestly, like, they're not very good at it. And so, it can be difficult, like, to actually go do that activity with them. So then you're like, even though I live in Colorado, by saying I only want a skier or a snowboarder, I've limited the number of possible people that I could date. And then if I even narrowed it further and say they need to be like an advanced or expert skier or snowboarder, I'm really like lowering the number of potential people I could date to a pretty small percentage. So, I mean, on the one hand, you could be like, well, that's what I'm looking for. And if I don't find it, that's fine. I can still be happy without them. And if I find somebody that does have that and a whole bunch of other qualities, then it's going to be the perfect match, and that's what I need to be happy. But I think there's a good balance in there somewhere with those type of things where you need to really look at it and go, it would be nice, it would be really great, but I think it can be really great without that also.
I call those nice to haves, not must haves. So
Yeah,
if you have it, it's a bonus, but it's not character traits. It is just a way that you connect. So common interest, common musical taste. This is where most people start to really feel a connection. But
yeah,
it's not the depth of the person. And we often can overlook a lot of red flags if you're just focusing on, do we have the same taste in music and do we both ski really well? And the
right.
other part of this is that something can happen. Like you could break a leg, you could end up not ever being able to ski again. And if that was your main way of connecting with somebody, you'd have nothing
Yeah,
else left, right? So we really have
yes.
to think beyond just this would be amazing if I could go skiing with this person every weekend. Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Music Unlimited. You can listen to over 70 million songs and thousands of playlists and stations. Plus, you can now stream your favorite podcasts like Last First Date Radio. You can listen to any song, anytime, anywhere, on any of your devices. Get Amazon Music Unlimited for free for 30 days. Just head on over to getamazonmusic.com/last first date to learn more and claim this offer.
There's also, I think, a lot to be said for having your own separate activities and passions that you can go away and do, and then that you do separately from each other and enjoy that without them around, and you're your own person and continuing to be the person that you were when you came into the relationship with them, with when they weren't around. So there's that as well.
That's such an important point, that you do need to have your own life, outside of the relationship. And you can even introduce each other to your passions and interests. It makes the relationship much more interesting. And it adds to the attraction, actually, when you have opposite interests and opposite energies. It just kind of leads to more of that, like, polarity, what we call, and that magnetism in a relationship.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's totally. So that's why I say, like, I've ended up, even though it would be really nice and I do spend a lot of time doing those things, it's like, yeah, I end up dating a lot of women here that don't do those things. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes
yeah.
sense.
But I
So,
would say for women though, if you are looking for a man, that your odds of meeting, well, the odds are good. There's way more men skiers than there are women. So it could be a good way for you to meet somebody.
if you're in Denver or a place where people ski, yeah,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I think go where the interest lies, because
Yeah.
whether it's a hiking meetup or biking or skiing or pickleball, which is huge now, or
Yeah.
backgammon, improvisation, comedy, classes. I've done a lot of those things. And I think it's just, you're doing what you love already. And if you meet somebody, it's a bonus, but you're in a good state of being because
Yeah.
you're doing what you love.
Yeah. Agree. Yeah. It is. I, that's probably why, like, I haven't been on online dating, which I honestly think is a great way to meet people, by the way. Online dating, it's a great way to is use it as an introduction tool. But I've been meeting a lot of people just out doing this, living my life, and through my people I meet through the podcast and the groups that I have related to that. And then here in Denver, we have this, it's called Front Range Single Trackers. It's kind of a double use of the word single track, which is a kind of mountain biking trail. And yeah, there's still, it's like a singles group that mountain bikes, and so meet people there. And like you said, like, even if you don't meet like a romantic interest, like, I've made a lot of great friends, men and women, through those groups. So yeah.
Yeah, and meeting friends is equally important, especially after a divorce when you could lose some of your friends that you've had together, or you're reinventing yourself and you're finding that you want new friends. And I think
Yeah.
for a lot of people, they're really lonely and they're dating because they want to fill a void. I think it's great that you're doing all these things. And I think I even when I work with people on online dating, I always encourage them to not just do one thing. Like online dating alone can get really frustrating.
Mhm.
And it's important to have other ways of being social and meeting people. So tell us a couple of other do's and don'ts for single divorced dads. You've talked about not ruling people out so quickly, finding somebody
Mhm.
who's in a similar place and similar intelligence, not just focused on the age. You're talking about you're getting clear on your must haves and deal breakers and having your own passions and interests. What else can you share for any single divorced dads or moms out there?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like a little bit this might well, as you probably know, and people that have done online dating, the an attractive woman that has a decent profile on there is inundated with men trying to meet up with her, send her messages, and try to go out on a date. And they usually, um, even to the point where women will get on there and go like, I was on there for 3 days and there were so many people, it was just too much for me to handle. And the guys get frustrated because they're like, I sent 20 messages to people and I didn't even get one response, or I got one response. And that is can be frustrating. For the online, I would say, like, for the women, like, look, the algorithm is such that when you first join, you're the new person. And so all the people that are already there, you pop up first. And so you're going to get all the, people, oh, there's a new person. I haven't sent them a message. And so you got to kind of ride it out. Mindy will say this all the time. Like, after a few weeks, it kind of dies down. And the guys, just sort of, you just got to be patient. But also for the men, is really, look at yourself. Like, what are how are you portraying yourself, if it's an online thing or just out in the world? Like, how are you dressing? How are you grooming yourself? Like, are you taking care of yourself? Like, are you healthy? Do you have healthy habits? And look around at your home. Like, are you taking care of that? Have you brought somebody over? How is it going to look to them? Those kinds of things where they're like, I can't find any women that are interested in me. It's like, well, look at yourself and say, am I doing things, and am I being the kind of a man that is going to attract women? And if not, like, you do some things. You do, your activities. Are you living a life that, where you're active and you're doing interesting things and things that you have a passion for? And those are the kind of things that women are going to find attractive. Like, if you're a guy that you're really into something, and that kind of a thing makes you happy outside of a relationship or dating, women find that really attractive. And, and then don't do it because of that, but just do, like, you enjoy it. Um, Now I've been divorced 13 years, and I, right away when I got divorced, I was miserable when I first was going through divorce. I'm like, this is going to be terrible. But as soon as I was divorced, I was like, this is pretty good, really. I got to do the things that I wanted to do that made me happy. I got to focus on my children when I had them, and built up this life and this community of people that I would hang out with that made me happy. And, like, men need to, especially when they first get divorced, should think about that. That's kind of my main advice for men, is like, really have your friends, or get like a dating coach or something to help you look at yourself and say, what is it that I want? What am I projecting out there into the world that women are going to see?
Most
Yeah.
people have a hard time seeing themselves. And
Yeah.
I recently started working with a couple of men who are able to be coached, because you really have to be open to
Mm-hmm.
honestly taking a look at yourself, like you're talking about, and getting the feedback. Like I just see some men who really don't step into their masculine, like they want to be people pleasers. And so they just want to say yes to everyone. And women lose respect if you're not taking a stand about certain things and pushing back. And how you dress, how you look, I mean, I have a 31-year-old son who studies this stuff because he was really struggling in the dating world. And he started grooming himself differently, shaving his head. I see that you have a shaved head. It's attractive. I mean, I've met men my age who have the comb over. It's the most
Yeah.
unattractive thing in the world. Like, guys,
I
we
would tell I
notice.
tell men relating to that specific topic. I tell men that all the time. I'm like, look, don't hide it. Just go for it. Like, buy the razor, even if it's really thinning. You can just buzz it off, and it's gonna look better. And
It
just
does.
throw it out there. And also save money on haircuts. I would be like, I probably was losing my hair like in my early 30s, and so I just bought some clippers and started doing it myself, and then just progressively shorter and shorter. And now I just use an electric razor up there. Yeah, don't try to hide it. It's going to look ridiculous. So that specific thing. But then that concept of like, hey, I'm trying to hide this or that. Like that goes back to what I was saying. Like, just be realistic and look at yourself and ask your friends, female friends, or like go to a dating coach or somebody like yourself to get some advice on how to do this, or listen to a podcast.
Yeah.
A dating podcast.
Yeah, there's tons of great podcasts out there for
Yeah.
dating and relationships, and you can learn a ton. I mean, that's how my son learned. He started listening to somebody who was a dating coach for men, and he got a lot of really good advice about really developing more confidence and stop being such a pleaser. I think that in and
Yeah.
of itself was huge. Just being like not feeling like you have to rescue people and the damsel in distress. I mean, I dated a guy a couple months ago who he said to me he's always been attracted to wounded damsels in distress. And I'm like, I guess we're not going to get along too well because it's not who I
Yeah.
am. Good luck with that. How's that working for you? Yeah. So I think that we really, if we can be honest with ourselves, we can be empowered to make these changes that really make a huge difference in how other people see us. We can show up in our power, in our highest self, instead of really coming into dating and thinking, there are no good people, or I'm such a victim, nobody picks me, and all that stuff that you were
Yeah.
talking about
Yeah.
before.
Yeah, I agree with that. And the same goes for women as far as that goes. They're like, oh, there's, I can't find anybody out there. There's like, well, I feel like the women are sort of take the opposite. Like they're like, well, there's no good guys out there. And I'm like, no, there are a lot, and think about like same deals. Like, well, if it's the old saying about like, well, if there's no good guys out there and you meet people, the common denominator with all those is you. So like, what are you putting out there? Who are you going after? Who are you picking to like try to date? And look at that and look at yourself to say like, well, maybe it's not just the men out there, because there's like in Denver, it's a big city relatively. Like I was saying earlier before, it's a small enough city where, everybody was kind of, a lot of people know each other. So, but there's a lot of single people to date here. And so you can't rule out and just say, oh, Denver's a terrible place to date. The men are all this or they're all that. That is just not true.
No.
So you got to kind of look at yourself and like, what are you putting out there? And who are you picking to try to date? You got to really look at that.
Yeah. Common
Yeah.
denominator is you always. I think every person in every city has said, it's my
Yes.
city, it's my age, it's my income, it's my background. I mean, it's one of the reasons I wrote the book Choice Points in Dating, because a lot of people say, well, I grew up like this, so I have no choice, or I live here, so I have no choice. I lost my spouse early on in the marriage and I had to raise my kids all by myself, and I never dated and I had no choice. I mean, I've heard it all. And we do
Yeah.
have choices. And the best thing you can do for yourself is to look within and to really, really make these changes and they're not huge changes. They're not like overhaul your personality. It's actually to reveal more of who you are and look
Yeah.
at some of the ways that you're judging people, like the "there are no good men" comment.
Yeah.
I
Hmm.
think that a lot of people also, their attraction is so wired to be attracted to people who are bad for them. So they're looking for that person where they're going to have those sparks and the butterflies, and that doesn't usually work out very well. And when you realize that some of the people who look boring on the outside or don't give you that immediate, oh my God, this is it feeling, are actually the best match for you.
Yes. So on our podcast, I have had a number of like therapists and relationship therapists and authors of relationship books. And many of them have said you got to kind of look out for those ones where you have this immediate spark with somebody and this immediate, like, just connection. Because, and it's a kind of a balance there. And at first I was like, what? Why? I love that. Like, that's what I'm always looking for. And they said, well, because it's a lot of these, like, sort of shared traumas and shared bad experiences that, like, give you that instant, like, the butterflies and the connection. All of a sudden, those are things to look out for. At first I was like, no, I don't know if I agree with that, but I started to sort of come around to thinking that that might be right, to look out for that, to
Yeah,
or be wary of it.
exactly. I think it's not saying you shouldn't look for a connection, but if you're connecting with a familiar feeling, and it's a familiar feeling that reminds you of your family of origin. Maybe you had a parent who was very cold and you like people who are a little distant and you feel like you have to win them over. That's a big signal to look out for. And that's what we're really talking about, because those people who are a little more aloof may feel confident, they may
Mm,
feel exciting, or charming people who feel very sparky, like, ooh, charming. They're picking me, but they're also picking other people at the same time. And it's like that
yeah.
person is giving the same attention to everybody, to the cashier, to a dog. It's
Yeah.
that's their personality. And so those are the things that we're talking about. Look out for people who are exceptionally sparky, because they can be full of red flags and we will not see
Mm.
them at all.
Yeah, that kind of goes to this. I'm sure you've probably brought this up, or you're probably aware of it, like that, the attachment theory for
Mm-hmm.
relationships, and those people that are avoidant, and then they sort of push you away, but they can draw you back in. And that knowing or awareness of that also, like, brings up this will come up a lot with the people that I interact with in the whole dating scene here, is the long distance ones where they'll meet somebody in a different city. And there's so many sort of pitfalls of that, but that is one of them. Is like they're sort of unattainable, and then when you're together with them, there's those sparks. But then, I always say that, like, when you're dating somebody from that's long distance, and even that's like, when I say long distance, I'm like, if you takes more than 2 hours to drive there, even 2 hours is probably long distance, really. Um, that when you're together with them, it's like you're all on your best behavior. You're you're only getting the best of them. It's not like you're every day sort of like, well, I have to go to work or whatever. It's like you're together literally on a vacation. And then when you're apart, you have this longing for them, and there's sort of this, that I wish we were together, but I can't be. And it goes back to some of what you were talking about. If there was somebody in your family of origin that was distant, it's sort of bringing that back up. It's like they're far away. So yeah, I warn people about the long distance relationships.
Yeah, the only way, in my opinion, that those relationships can work is, first of all, if one of you is willing to move closer to the other person at some point. There has to be an end game. Otherwise, it's a never ending torture that
Mm-hmm.
you can't be with this person. I mean, I have seen in some unusual experiences where there was a couple I knew who was married, where he worked in Washington, D.C., she lived in Manhattan. and they would see each other for 5-day weekends. So basically they were together. They would,
Yeah.
he would come up to New York, she would fly down to Washington. But
Yeah.
it's the plan. And how do you connect between visits, and who's putting the effort in? And are you both putting the effort in? And how do you keep the relationship alive? You have to work a lot harder to make it
Yeah.
work. And to me, also, one of the most important things I learned is the key to relationship success is that you feel just as good when you're away from them as you do when you're with them. We often
Yeah.
have the opposite happen. We have like these amazing dates, and then when you're not with them, you're feeling anxious because you haven't heard from them and they're not answering texts. And you really have to have that feeling of safety when you're
Hmm.
developing a relationship with somebody.
And the long distance ones, when they happen, it sort of circles back to that thing about what we were talking about with, oh, in my city, there's no, the men or the women in my city just aren't, there's no good ones to date. And so that's what a lot of times is their justification. Like, well, that's why I end up dating somebody that lives in a whole other city or state, is because there's no good ones here. And I'm like, that's just a bull. Like, you haven't, like, there's literally thousands of single men or women that fall into your age range and activities that you might like, and you haven't met or dated all of them. So you can't really say that. I would look closer.
Yeah, right. Take a better look. I lived in Manhattan for a while, and and I think this is true of some really big cities, there's this paradox of choice where there's so much choice that you're never really spending time to get to know one person. And I used to feel this,
Yeah.
like I would be talking to a guy and he'd be looking over my head at the next person who was maybe a little more
Yeah.
blonde and a little more, it's just,
Yeah.
that also can be an issue. But basically, there's a lot we can do to really find love where we are without having to go long distance, without having to torture yourself. Do you have any final words of advice for somebody who wants to go on their last first date?
I have a little tagline that I say on my podcast. It's that I say at the beginning and it's the end. And I believe this is like, just go out there, try to have some fun, try not to hurt anyone, and try and fall in love. And just like try to like narrow it down to that right there.
So
Yeah.
go out there, try to have some fun, try not to hurt anyone, and try to fall in love. Is that the whole
Yep.
thing? Okay.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be so hard, right?
Exactly.
Well, Jeff, this has just been an enlightening conversation. If you can
Yeah.
share one link, how can people
Yeah.
find you?
Probably the easiest way is, if you're on Facebook, is just look up Dating Daze. Daze is how I spell days, and just find us on there. And I post the links to these new shows. You can also find Dating Daze, Daze, on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you're listening to your podcasts. You should be able to pull it up just searching for that.
Awesome. And I look forward to being on your podcast soon.
Yeah. Yeah. Sounds good.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for coming on the show today, sharing some wisdom from Denver,
Yeah.
Colorado, from a divorced single man who's having fun dating.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot for having me. I love the podcast.
Thank you. And thanks,
All right.
everybody, for listening. If you love our show, please give us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And as always, here's to your last first date. If you are ready to get unstuck, gain new tools, become more empowered, and finally find your last first date, I'd love to talk to you. Fill out an application to be considered for a complimentary half-hour love breakthrough session at lastfirstdate.com/application.